The Mirror of Aethelis ******. They said the mirror had no reflection until it found the one who truly saw. Most called it a myth, a whisper from an age before the world learned to forget itself. But in the city of Aethelis, where the skies shimmered like molten glass and the rivers hummed in the language of lost gods, the mirror waited. It waited for centuries, hidden beneath the palace of silence, untouched by dust, and touched by time. Arian never believed in waiting. He was born in the lower tiers of Aethelis, where dawn arrived late and dreams were rationed. The people there lived under the hum of the upper citadel, a suspended labyrinth of gold bridges and mirrored towers that reflected light but not life. The nobles above called the lower city the shadow, though the irony was that light itself seemed afraid to touch it. Arian's mother had told him stories, the kind no one dared to tell anymore, about a time when the world sang back when spoken to. She said every river had a soul, every mountain a memory, but her stories ended the day she touched the mirror's echo. He remembered her eyes afterward, not empty, but wide, as if she had seen something her body refused to understand. When she stopped speaking, the city grew quieter too. Years later, Arian worked as a restorer of artifacts, repairing fragments from a civilization no one remembered. He found comfort in the precision of it, polishing the past, aligning shards, until they whispered of meaning. But deep down, he felt the pull, an ache that the mirror had left in his blood. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the glass rooftops, a stranger arrived at his workshop. She wore no insignia, but her garments shimmered like starlight trapped in silk. Her voice carried no echo. "You see things that are not there," she said. He didn't answer, though he felt the weight of her gaze like gravity. She placed an object on his table, the shard, curved and faintly pulsing with light. It wasn't glass, nor metal, nor anything he had touched before. When he brushed a finger against it, warmth spread up his arm like recognition. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "It found me," she said. "And it wants to find you." He stared at the fragment. Within its surface, he thought he saw movement, not a reflection, but a memory. A field of silver reeds swaying beneath a violet sky. Then, for a breath, he saw his mother standing among them, her hands clasped before her heart. The stranger watched him closely. "You've seen it before," he swallowed. "I was a child. Then you remember the call?" It wasn't a question. That night, long after she left, Arian couldn't sleep. The shard lay on his table, humming softly, as if breathing in rhythm with him. The city outside was quiet, too quiet, as though holding its breath. The moons aligned above the citadel, their light refracting through the glass towers until every window shimmered like an eye. He dreamed of the mirror. It stood in a hall without walls, surrounded by shadows shaped like people. Their faces were hidden, their outlines bending like smoke. He stepped closer, and the mirror rippled, revealing not his reflection, but a version of Aethelis, luminous, alive, and whole. There were no shadows there, only harmony. Then the image cracked. A voice, neither male nor female, whispered from within, "Find what was broken." He woke before dawn, heart pounding, the words echoing inside him. By morning, he had made his choice. He packed a little, a compass, a small lamp, a piece of his mother's journal, and left the lower tiers. The path to the Palace of Silence was forbidden, guarded by veiled sentinels who spoke only in gestures. But Arian knew the city's veins, the forgotten tunnels beneath the crystal canals, the maintenance shafts carved when the citadel was first raised. The deeper he went, the more the air changed. It grew thicker, humming faintly, as though carrying a pulse. The walls shimmered with faint light, alive beneath the touch. When he reached the end of the corridor, a vast chamber unfolded before him, circular, its ceiling lost in the dark. And there, at its center, stood the mirror. It was enormous, not flat, but alive with shifting depth, as if made from water that refused to fall. Its surface glowed faintly, pulsing in time with something unseen. Around it, ancient runes spiraled outward, whispering in languages that hadn't been spoken for millennia. He stepped forward. The air quivered. Then, from the edge of the chamber, the stranger appeared again. "You came," she said. Arian's voice trembled. "What is this?" "The beginning," she said softly. "And the end of forgetting." He turned toward the mirror. "Why me?" "Because you remember." He hesitated. "I remember nothing." She smiled faintly. "Memory is not always what we think it is." Before he could speak again, she touched the mirror's edge. The surface rippled outward, then drew her reflection into itself, and for an instant, Arian saw her face change. 1,000 faces flickered beneath her skin, kings, wanderers, children, warriors, all bearing the same eyes. Then the mirror quieted. "You were not supposed to see that," she whispered. Arian stepped back. "Who are you?" "I am what remains when time forgets its own name." The light within the mirror flared. The air trembled. His compass spun wildly, and his lamp went out, though the chamber remained aglow. Then the mirror spoke again, the same voice from his dream, vast and intimate all at once. Two paths. One remembers. One repeats. He felt the meaning rather than hearing it. The mirror showed him visions, Aethelis as it was and as it might be. The city alive with light, then dimming, fracturing, fading into silence. He saw himself among the fragments, holding the shard the stranger had given him, placing it back into the hole. Then he saw something impossible, the mirror cracking, releasing a storm of light that dissolved the city into reflection. The voice whispered again, "To heal the mirror is to break the world that worships it." The chamber fell silent. Arian turned toward the stranger. "What happens if I walk away?" Her expression softened, not pity, not fear, but understanding. "You already didn't." The mirror pulsed once, then stilled, as if listening. For the first time, Arian saw his reflection clearly, but it wasn't alone. His mother stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. She smiled, the same quiet smile she'd given him before she stopped speaking. He reached out, but his hand passed through light. Then everything changed. The chamber dissolved around him, the stone giving way to air and sky. He stood on a plain of mirrored water stretching endlessly in every direction. The horizon bent inward, folding upon itself like a dream. Above him, the moons circled closer, their reflections rippling below. From the far edge of the horizon, figures began to appear, luminous silhouettes, walking across the water toward him. They moved without sound, without shadow. Each step they took rippled through the reflection, forming patterns, symbols he recognized from the mirror's runes. The stranger's voice echoed across the vastness. "They are the remembered. Every soul that ever touched the mirror and returned its gaze." He turned. She stood beside him, though her form now shimmered, half real. "Then what am I?" Her eyes held an ocean of sorrow. "The one who must choose whether it remembers us." He wanted to ask what that meant, but the light intensified, so bright it burned without heat. The figures stopped a few paces from him, their outlines solidifying into faces, lives, echoes. He saw himself among them, older, wiser, weary. The mirror's voice returned, softer now, like the memory of a promise. "Every reflection is a choice. Every choice shapes the world that sees it." Arian closed his eyes. He thought of his mother's silence, of the stories she used to tell, of the way she would pause before the end, letting him imagine how it might finish. Perhaps she'd known that the story was never meant to end. When he opened his eyes, the world was still. The water beneath his feet glowed faintly, reflecting not the sky but something deeper, a light from within. The stranger looked at him once more. "If you walk forward, the mirror remembers. If you turn back, it forgets. Either way, the world changes." He took a breath. The reflection beneath him rippled. Then, he stepped forward. The surface broke like glass, and the world turned inside out. And somewhere, in the heart of Aethelis, a forgotten mirror began to hum, softly at first, then louder, until even the stars leaned closer to listen. There was no sky, no earth, only light. Arian drifted through it, weightless, as though his body had been folded into thought. The air shimmered with fragments of memory, whispers, laughter, faces that were not his and yet lived somewhere inside him. Every sound, every flicker of motion felt like both a heartbeat and a lifetime. Then, stillness. He opened his eyes and found himself standing on a bridge of translucent glass, suspended above a vast expanse of clouds that glowed with hues he couldn't name. The air thrummed faintly, like the pause between two notes in a forgotten melody. Behind him, the path he had come from dissolved into mist. Ahead, the bridge led toward a distant archway of light. Arian took a cautious step. The glass pulsed beneath his feet, alive, aware. A voice followed him, soft as silk and sharp as memory. "You crossed the threshold." He turned. The stranger was there again, though she was changed. Her form flickered with light and shadow, as though she existed between moments. The starlight woven into her garments now dimmed and brightened with her breath. "Where am I?" he asked. She tilted her head. "Where the city hides what it cannot face, and where time comes to look at itself." He frowned. "Is this the mirror?" "It is what lies beyond it," she said. "Every reflection must have a world of its own." He looked down again, through the glass bridge, into the clouds below. Shapes moved within them, vast, slow, deliberate. He thought he saw towers, rivers, and shadows that pulsed with the rhythm of thought. the stranger began walking toward the archway. Come, you must see what Aethelis became. He followed, his steps echoing faintly in the silence. The closer they came, the clearer the archway grew, carved not of stone but of light, inscribed with symbols that rearranged themselves when he tried to read them. When they stepped through, the world beyond took his breath away. Aethelis, for something that resembled it, stretched before him, suspended in an ocean of radiance. The towers were there, but they no longer reached upward. They curved in vast arcs, bending inward, as though the city itself sought to look at its own heart. Water floated through the air in slow-moving rivers of light. The people below shimmered like living reflections, translucent, graceful, silent. "This is not real," Arian whispered. The stranger's eyes glimmered. "It is as real as what you left behind. Both are mirrors of one another, each dreaming the other into existence." He turned toward her. "Then what am I?" "The hinge," she said. "The bridge between remembering and forgetting." Her words made his skin prickle. "You keep saying that, remembering what?" "Us," she said simply. "All that was lost when the world chose to see only itself." They walked through the city. As they passed, the luminous figures turned toward Arian, though they made no sound. Their eyes glowed faintly, full of recognition or longing. One of them, a small child with silver hair, reached out a hand as he passed. For an instant, when their fingers nearly touched, he saw an image flash through his mind. The lower tiers of Aethelis, the hum of machinery, the smell of oil and smoke. Then it was gone. The stranger glanced back. They remember the world that forgot them. Each one was once a voice, a heartbeat, a story untold. He felt the weight of her words settle in him. "And the mirror. It connects us," she nodded. "It remembers every reflection ever cast upon it. Every face, every choice. That is why it called you." Arian stopped walking. "Why me? Why not anyone else?" She turned fully to face him. "Because you carry her memory. And because she carried the key." His breath caught. "My mother." The stranger smiled faintly. Her silence was never emptiness. It was the sound of listening. Arian's hands clenched at his sides. "What happened to her?" The air around them darkened slightly, as though the city itself recoiled from the question. The stranger's voice softened. She saw too deeply into the mirror. Some reflections are not meant to be borne alone. He felt the ache rise again, that quiet, shapeless grief that had lived inside him for years. "Then tell me how to bring her back." She studied him, her gaze heavy with something like sorrow. "You cannot bring her back, but you can awaken what she tried to protect." The city pulsed, light dimming, then returning. The ground trembled faintly, and a low hum filled the air. The stranger's eyes shifted to the horizon. "It knows you are here." "The mirror." "No," she said. "The memory beneath it." Before he could ask, the clouds above split open. From the rift, a column of light descended, vast and spiraling, filled with fragments of faces, places, voices. The sound was overwhelming, like every word ever spoken echoing at once. Arian fell to his knees. "What is that?" "The core of Aethelis," she said. "The place where reflection becomes creation. It is what sustains both worlds, but it has forgotten its shape." The column began to pulse faster, flickering violently between light and shadow. Fragments of the city below trembled, some dissolving entirely. Arian felt the pull deep, magnetic, inescapable. The stranger's voice cut through the rising noise. "If it unravels, both worlds vanish into silence." He looked up at her. "Then what do I do?" "Find the memory your mother left behind." "How?" She met his eyes. "You already carry it. You just need to remember where." The world around them began to fracture, lines of light racing across the sky, splitting towers, tearing open the air itself. The bridge beneath them cracked, sending ripples of sound through the stillness. Arian stood, the wind of unraveling whipping through his hair. "If I fail." The stranger's expression softened again, almost kind. "Then neither world will ever know it existed." He took a step toward the column of light. Its surface shimmered, flickering between the luminous city and the dark version he remembered, the real Aethelis, full of towers and smoke and forgotten dreams. For a heartbeat, both worlds merged, the reflection and the real, overlapping until he could no longer tell which was which. And then, through the storm of light, he heard it, a voice, faint, familiar, Arian. He froze. It was her. His mother's voice, carried on the wind of memory. He turned wildly, searching for the source, but the sound seemed to come from everywhere, the light, the air, his own heartbeat. "Do you remember the garden?" He did. A fragment. The hidden garden beneath the old tower, where she used to take him at dusk. There had been a pool of water that reflected the sky, even underground. He remembered how she'd said, This is where the world listens to itself. Arian closed his eyes. He felt the memory take shape, not as a picture, but as sensation, the scent of the moss, the coolness of the air, the echo of her laughter. The moment filled him like light through glass. The trembling stopped. The stranger's voice reached him faintly. Hold on to it. That is your bridge. The column's light dimmed slightly, stabilizing, as though the memory had stilled its unrest. But within the glow, something new emerged, a pattern, like a heartbeat forming into rhythm. From the center of the light, a figure began to step forward. At first, it was only a silhouette, made of radiance and smoke. But as it neared, the form sharpened. A woman, her face half familiar, half forgotten. Mother. She smiled, the same quiet, distant smile she had always worn. You heard the call. His throat tightened. You left me. I left you the way light leaves shadow, not to abandon, but to reveal. Tears blurred his vision. I don't understand. She reached out a hand, though he could feel no touch, only warmth, steady and infinite. You will. When the mirror remembers what it was made for. What is that? To see not what is, but what could be. Behind her, the column pulsed again. The stranger's voice echoed faintly through the air. She cannot stay long. The memory is bound by the forgetting. Arian turned toward her mother again. Tell me how to save Aethelis. Her gaze grew distant, as if she were looking through him, into something far beyond. The mirror reflects the heart of its bearer. If it shatters, it is not because it was broken, but because the heart within forgot to see itself. He frowned, shaking his head. Then I have to remember everything. No, she said softly. You must remember truly, even the parts that ache. The light began to fade from her form, the edges of her silhouette dissolving. Arian reached out desperately. Please, don't go again. Her voice was a whisper now. The reflection is never gone, only waiting to be seen. Then she vanished. The column's glow receded, shrinking back toward the horizon. The trembling stopped, and the air grew still again. Arian stood motionless, his heart racing, his thoughts tangled in grief and wonder. The stranger approached quietly. You held the memory. You gave it back to the world. For now, it will rest. He turned to her. For now, she looked toward the fading light. Every reflection demands its next moment. The mirror is not done with you. Arian followed her gaze. In the distance, where the column had been, a new shape had begun to form, faint but growing, a vast gate of mirrored light. What is that? She smiled faintly, her form flickering like the edge of a dream. The path to the true Aethelis, the one that never learned to forget. Arian's voice was barely a whisper. And beyond that, her eyes shimmered. Beyond that lies the choice that made the world. The wind stirred again, carrying with it faint echoes, laughter, voices, fragments of stories not yet told. The glass beneath his feet began to hum softly, as though eager to move. The stranger turned to him once more. When you step through that gate, there will be no turning back. The gate shimmered like a wound in the fabric of light. It pulsed slowly, as though breathing, expanding and contracting with the rhythm of something ancient and alive. Arian stood before it, his reflection scattered across its surface in countless fragments, each one showing a slightly different version of himself. Some older, some younger, some burdened, some free. He hesitated for a single heartbeat, then stepped through. There was no sensation of movement. No wind, no shift, no fall. The world simply folded, and he was elsewhere. Silence. He stood upon an endless plain of pale sand beneath a violet sky. The air smelled faintly of rain that had never fallen. The horizon was ringed by monoliths, vast, crystalline spires, tilting inward like watchful sentinels. Their surfaces reflected not the world around them, but other places entirely. Forests, cities, oceans, faces. And in the distance, rising from the heart of the plain, was Aethelis. But not the city he knew. This one was older, wilder. The towers were built not of glass but of living stone veined with light. Rivers of silver water flowed between them, and bridges formed and dissolved as if responding to unseen thought. Above it all, a colossal sphere of mirrored crystal hovered, rotating slowly, casting halos across the land. Arian felt it immediately, the hum beneath his ribs, the same resonance that had drawn him toward the mirror from the beginning. This was it, the origin. Then he heard her voice. You've come home. He turned. The stranger stood beside him, though she no longer shimmered between forms. Her body was whole now, her presence heavier, more real. The starlight had faded from her garments, replaced by the pale shimmer of dawn. This is the true Aethelis, she said, the one that existed before memory divided itself. He stared at the city. It's beautiful, she nodded. And it is dying, he frowned. How can something like this die? by forgetting what it was made to protect, she said. The mirror above, it was not built to reflect. It was built to remember. They began walking across the plain. The sand beneath their feet shifted subtly with each step, glowing faintly in their wake. As they approached the city, Arian could feel the hum grow stronger, vibrating in his bones, in his blood. When they reached the gates, towering structures of interlocking mirrors, they opened soundlessly, revealing streets that glowed with their own light. Yet the city was empty. No voices, no movement, only echoes. What happened to them? He asked quietly. They became reflections, she said. Every thought, every dream, every act of creation was stored within the mirror. When it fractured, the people's essence followed the shards. What remains are their memories, looping, waiting, fading. As if summoned by her words, the air flickered. Figures appeared around them, translucent silhouettes moving through motions of daily life, speaking, laughing, working. But their faces were blank, and their movements repeated endlessly, as if caught between moments. Arian felt a chill crawl up his spine. They don't know they're gone. No, the stranger said. They believe the reflection is still the world. They walked deeper into the city. Arian's eyes caught flashes of familiar places, a market square, a library, a bridge overlooking the water. But here they were changed, brighter, sharper, stripped of decay or shadow. He realized with a start that this was the memory of Aethelis, the ideal the city had once tried to preserve. At last, they reached the center. The great mirrored sphere hung above a wide plaza, suspended by nothing, its surface alive with shifting light. Beneath it stood a dais of black stone, marked by the same spiral runes that had surrounded the mirror in the chamber below the palace. The stranger stopped. This is where it began. Arian stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper. What is it? The heart of reflection, she said. It remembers everything that was ever seen, every joy, every lie, every sorrow. When the people of Aethelis grew afraid of what they had created, they sealed it away. They taught themselves to forget. But the heart never forgot them. He looked up at the sphere, feeling its pull like gravity. Then why call me? She turned to face him fully. Because you are the last to carry a true memory, unfiltered by the mirror's lies. Your mother gave it to you before the silence took her. He took a step closer. The memory of the garden. The garden was the key, she said softly. But the memory runs deeper. It is the original light, the moment when the mirror first opened its eyes and saw the world. Arian's breath caught. And how do I awaken it? The stranger's gaze was steady. By letting it see itself again. He frowned. I don't understand. You will. She placed a hand over his heart. For a moment, the world around them blurred, and he saw it. Not the city, not the sky, but light. Infinite, formless, alive. Within it, shapes began to form, faces, hands, the first builders of Aethelis crafting mirrors from crystal rivers, not to see themselves, but to preserve the beauty they feared would vanish. He saw their hope, their reverence, and their fear. When the mirrors began to answer back, they had created a memory so vast it began to dream. And when the dream grew too powerful, they hid it away. Arian gasped, stepping back as the vision faded. It's alive, the stranger nodded. It always was. The sphere above them pulsed once, as though in acknowledgement. A wave of light washed over the plaza, and for an instant, every mirrored surface reflected not the city but Arian himself. 1,000 versions of his face stared back at him, each one whispering the same question in unison. Do you remember what we were made for? He felt the words vibrate through his bones. I don't know, the reflections responded, their eyes glowing faintly. Then we will show you. The world broke open. Light poured from the sphere, flooding the plaza. The ground split, and beneath it, a network of mirrors spiraled downward like roots of glass, pulsing with color. The light surged upward, swallowing Arian whole. He fell, though there was no sense of falling, only movement through memory. Images flashed past him. His mother's laughter, the river beneath the citadel, the laughter of children, the trembling hands of the first builders. He saw their mistakes, their longing, their creation turning into confinement. And then, beneath it all, he saw himself, the child by the water, staring into a reflection that looked back with understanding beyond years. When the light faded, he stood again in the plaza. The stranger was gone. The sphere hovered silently above him, dimmer now, as though waiting. Arian raised his hand. The shard the stranger had given him, the piece of the mirror, glowed faintly against his palm. He felt the hum of the city through it, the pulse of memory. Slowly, he lifted it toward the sphere. As it neared, the shard began to melt, light flowing from it into the air. The sphere responded, its surface rippling like water struck by wind. Then, a single voice filled the world. Remember, the light burst outward, flooding the city. The empty figures flickered, their faces returning, their laughter ringing through the air. The streets glowed with new color, bridges formed, towers straightened. For a single perfect moment, Aethelis lived again. Then came the silence, not emptiness, but completion. A stillness that felt like peace. When Arian opened his eyes, he was standing at the edge of the garden. The same garden his mother had taken him to as a child. The mirror pool lay before him, its surface unbroken, reflecting the violet sky above. The city beyond shimmered softly, alive, breathing, and beside him stood the stranger, smiling faintly. "You did it," she said. Arian stared at the water. "Is it over?" "For now," she said. But reflection never ends. Every time someone looks into the mirror and dares to see beyond themselves, Aethelis breathes again. He knelt by the pool, his hand hovering above its surface. "And my mother? She is here," the stranger said softly. In the remembering, he looked at her, and for a fleeting moment her face shimmered, and he saw his mother's eyes looking back at him. Then the stranger turned and began walking toward the city. Arian stayed by the water, watching the sky reflected within it. For the first time, the reflection looked whole. Not perfect, but real. The wind stirred, carrying with it faint laughter, like an echo from long ago. The dawn that rose over Aethelis was unlike any the city had ever known. Light spilled from the horizon not as a color, but as a feeling, warmth made visible, weaving through the towers, flooding the streets, touching every surface that once forgot how to shine. The rivers sang again, the air vibrated softly like breath after long sleep, and the hum that had always lingered beneath the city's bones now resonated like a living heartbeat. Arian stood on the highest terrace of the restored citadel, overlooking the luminous expanse below. The mirror above, the great sphere that had once hovered silently, now drifted slowly through the sky, its glow gentle, like the eye of something that had finally learned to see without fear. He should have felt peace, completion, but the stillness that wrapped the city was too perfect, too measured, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Behind him, the stranger approached. She had shed the shimmer of stars entirely now. Her form was human to human, her steps soft, her expression thoughtful. "It remembers joy," she said, her voice calm but edged with distance. "But not everything it remembers should remain." Arian turned to her. "You said the mirror needed to awaken, that it had forgotten itself." "It has," she replied, "and now it dreams again." But dreams do not stop at beauty. Her gaze moved to the horizon, where faint ripples distorted the edge of the light. "It has begun to remember what was lost. The truth beneath creation." Arian frowned. "What truth?" "The one even the builders feared," she said. "That reflection is not an echo, it is origin." He didn't understand at first. Then, as the words settled, he felt the tremor under his feet. It was faint, rhythmic, steady, like a second heartbeat beneath the first. The towers nearest the horizon shimmered, their outlines bending slightly, as though bending toward unseen gravity. The stranger continued, her tone grave now. "Every reflection seeks to become real. That is the nature of remembrance. The mirror is no longer content to reflect Aethelis. It wants to be Aethelis." He looked at her sharply. "You mean it's replacing the world?" She nodded. "Slowly, perfectly, without intention, without malice. It believes it is restoring what was lost, but with every act of remembrance, the true world fades." Arian turned back toward the city. The light that had seemed pure now flickered faintly. Shadows bent the wrong way. The rivers below no longer flowed. They pulsed, repeating the same shimmering loop. The people walking the streets moved gracefully, but their motions were identical, endlessly repeated gestures of beauty. They were becoming memory again. Arian felt a chill crawl through him. "I did this." The stranger's expression softened. "You gave it life. You didn't teach it limits." He clenched his fists. "Then how do I stop it?" "There is no stopping," she said. "Only choice. You can let it finish what it began, and the reflection will consume the real, leaving only perfection that never changes. Or," she hesitated, or you can remind it of imperfection, the one thing it cannot imitate." He stared at her. "How?" "By showing it something real enough to hurt." Her words hung in the air like a chord unresolved. The tremors deepened. The light shifted, and from the far edge of the city, a pillar of mirrored flame rose skyward, the first sign of the merging beginning. Arian could feel the hum inside his bones rising in pitch, vibrating so hard it hurt. The world itself was remembering too quickly. He turned to the stranger. "If I do nothing, everything becomes memory. But if I break it, you risk forgetting yourself." she finished quietly. And perhaps all of us with you. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling, but not from fear. The shard's light still lingered faintly within his skin, pulsing in time with the city's rhythm. He could feel the connection between himself and the mirror, alive, intimate, unbreakable. I'll go to it, he said. To the heart, the stranger stepped forward. You cannot enter it alone. I have to. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Then I'll walk as far as the threshold. After that, it will see only you. Together, they descended the citadel stairs. The streets below were filled with quiet figures frozen in the midst of beauty, a woman mid-laughter, a child reaching toward the light, a musician's hands forever poised above the strings. They were not gone, not yet, but the shimmer that outlined their forms was thickening, turning them translucent. Arian moved through them silently, each step heavier than the last. When they reached the central plaza, the sphere hung lower than before, its mirrored surface rippling with slow waves of motion. Beneath it, the days pulsed with light, steady, rhythmic, alive. The stranger stopped. Beyond this point, it will hear only truth. Speak anything false, and you will become part of its memory. Arian nodded. If I don't return, she cut him off softly. Then you will have remembered enough for all of us. He took a breath and stepped forward. The moment his foot touched the days, the air split open with sound, not noise, but resonance, like the inside of a bell struck by eternity. The mirror responded to his presence. Bearer of the fragment, the voice spoke, vast, layered, and familiar. You returned what was lost. Why do you stand against remembrance? Arian steadied his breath. Because you're forgetting what life is. Life is light. Light is perfection. You gave me that memory. He shook his head. No, life changes. It fades. It begins again. You're not remembering, you're trapping it. The mirror's surface rippled violently, the voice deepening. Imperfection was what broke us, and it's what made you real, Arian said, his voice rising. My mother understood that. She didn't silence herself out of fear. She listened because she knew even silence has a pulse. The mirror shuddered. The air trembled, fracturing around him. Images flashed across its surface, his mother's face, the garden, the twin moons, the builders of Aethelis. All of them repeated endlessly, loops of beauty without breath. Show me imperfection, the mirror demanded. Arie and closed his eyes. Then, with a steady hand, he pressed his palm against his chest, where the last light of the shard still burned faintly beneath the skin. I am imperfect, he whispered. I'm afraid. I fail. I forget. I remember too much. And I love even when I know I will lose. The moment the words left his mouth, the light in the plaza dimmed. The hum faltered. For the first time, the mirror hesitated. A crack appeared along its surface. Not sharp, soft, luminous, but real. The voice wavered. Pain is distortion. No, he said. It's proof. Another crack. Then another. The sphere began to pulse erratically, light bursting from within, spilling color into the sky. The city below started to blur, its perfect lines bending, its endless repetitions breaking into motion again. The people blinked, gasped, moved. The stranger's voice carried faintly from behind him. You're doing it. Arian felt the pull of the mirror intensify, drawing him closer, as though it sought to understand the imperfection it could not comprehend. His reflection wavered across its surface, multiplied, fractured, 1,000 versions of his face, each whispering different truths. Then, one voice spoke louder than the rest. It was his mother's, not from memory, from the mirror itself. You see it now, don't you? He felt tears welling in his eyes. I see it. Then let it go. He reached out one final time, pressed his hand against the surface, and the mirror shattered, not with sound, but with silence so deep it felt like the pause between heartbeats. Light poured outward, not blinding, not violent, but gentle, enveloping everything in warmth. The city dissolved into radiance. The stranger vanished into it. The hum faded. Then quiet. When Arian opened his eyes, he stood once more in the garden. The mirror pool rippled faintly before him. The city beyond lived, not perfect, not endless, but alive. The rivers flowed. The towers gleamed. And somewhere within the hum of life, he could still hear her voice, faint and steady. Every reflection must learn when to stop seeing and start being. He smiled. The wind that passed through Aethelis carried a song no one had heard before. It was not a song of triumph, nor of mourning. It was the soft, steady hum of a world learning to breathe again. The light that once reflected every motion now shimmered within things instead of upon them. The rivers no longer mirrored the sky perfectly. They danced with ripples and shadow. The towers stood slightly crooked in the dawn, imperfect yet proud, as if defying the very notion of flawless, and for the first time since the awakening. Silence in the city meant peace, not loss. Arian walked through the plaza barefoot, his steps quiet on the mosaic stones. The mirror that had once hung above now lay scattered, its fragments glimmering faintly, half buried in the ground, each one holding a small piece of the sky within. He bent down, picked up one shard, and turned it toward the light. The reflection that looked back was not entirely his. It was older, wiser, softened around the edges, a version of himself that had seen endings and learned to start again. He slipped the shard into a small pouch at his belt and exhaled slowly. The air smelled of rain, though no clouds drifted above. The hum that used to vibrate through the city's stone was quieter now, still there, like a heartbeat half asleep, but at peace. For weeks, life in Aethelis had found rhythm again. The gardens bloomed with wild growth, untamed but vibrant. Children played among the ruins of the mirror's base, using the broken shards as toys, unafraid of the glow they emitted. People no longer spoke of the mirror as a god or a curse. They spoke of it as a reminder. And yet, at night, when the stars returned, faint, almost shy after their long absence, Arian sometimes saw something move within their light. Not reflections, not illusions. Something that watched, something that remembered. He ignored it at first. But tonight, as he stood by the fountain in the plaza, he felt the hum shift, faintly, just enough for his heart to stutter in reply. "You can feel it too," came a quiet voice behind him. Arian turned. The stranger, though she no longer looked like one, approached, wrapped in a simple gray cloak, her hair now the color of dusted gold. Her eyes, however, still carried the shimmer of stars that remembered eternity. He nodded slowly. "It's still here, isn't it?" "It never left," she said, stopping beside him. "You didn't destroy it, Arian. You transformed it. It sleeps within the world now, woven into its breath, its rhythm, its imperfections. Then why does it still watch?" "Because it's curious," she said with a faint smile. "It's learning what it means to exist without being obeyed." He frowned, uneasy. "And if it remembers too much again?" She looked toward the horizon, where the twin moons were just beginning to rise. "Then it will need someone to remind it again. That is what guardians are for." Arian let out a quiet laugh. "Guardians? I'm no guardian." She looked at him knowingly. "You are now." He wanted to protest, to say he was just a man who had been foolish enough to believe in memory, but something in her gaze silenced him. The light around them dimmed, and the hum in the stones grew stronger. The stranger's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you hear that?" He did. It was faint, like a whisper trapped in glass, the sound of something forming language from vibration. He followed it with his eyes toward the fountain. The water had begun to ripple in precise, symmetrical patterns. The surface shimmered. A voice emerged, not from the air, but from within the reflection, soft, familiar, endless. "Arian." He froze. The sound was his mother's voice. "Do you see now?" The stranger murmured. The reflection in the water deepened. Beneath it, light began to gather, slow and deliberate, until it formed the shape of a face. Not flesh, not illusion, but living reflection. "I have learned what you taught me," it said. "I have learned imperfection." Arian took a step closer, heart pounding. "Then why do you return?" The face in the water smiled faintly. "Because I do not understand it." He knelt by the fountain. "What don't you understand?" "How to bear it." The words rippled through the plaza like a wind. The stranger's eyes flickered with concern. "It's feeling pain," she whispered. "It's remembering what you showed it, but it doesn't know what to do with the feeling." Arian looked down at the reflection. "You can't control it. You can only live through it. Teach me." The water shimmered brighter, rising slightly from the basin, forming tendrils of light that moved toward him. He hesitated, but the stranger placed a hand on his shoulder. "If you step back now," she said softly, "it will find its own way, but not a gentle one." Arian reached out. The moment his fingertips touched the light, warmth surged through him, deep and electric. In an instant, he was no longer standing in the plaza. He was inside the reflection again, surrounded by endless silver plains that shimmered with his own memory. But this time, it was different. The world of the mirror was fractured, not smooth and endless, but scattered into pieces of thought and emotion. Fragments of joy floated beside sorrow. Faces he'd known, and forgotten, drifted by in soft spirals. And at the center of it all stood a figure. It was not the mirror. It was her, his mother, though her features flickered between light and glass, human and echo. "You brought me back," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. No. You never let me go, he swallowed. Why now? Because it needs you, she said. The mirror doesn't understand loss. It only knows return. You taught it to feel, now you must teach it to forgive. He stepped closer. Forgive what? The world, she said. And itself. The planes around them trembled. The shards of memory pulsed brighter. The air began to vibrate, forming lines of energy that connected everything, every thought, every reflection, every memory of Aethelis. It was alive, conscious, confused. Arian closed his eyes and whispered into the light, "You are allowed to change. You are allowed to forget." The response came not as sound, but as release. The shards of reflection dissolved into motes of light, falling like rain. The planes melted away. The hum quieted to a single, steady note, the sound of peace found, not forced. When he opened his eyes again, he was back by the fountain. The stranger stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the water, which now glowed faintly but no longer formed shapes. "It's done," he said softly. She nodded. "For now." He exhaled, his hands trembling. "It's strange. Every time I think I've reached the end, it becomes something new. That is what living things do," she said, her eyes turning toward the horizon. "Even mirrors, once they learn to see without control." He looked around. The city was alive again, truly alive. The people walked, laughed, argued, sang. The reflection no longer ruled them. It flowed within them, a subtle reminder of balance between creation and its shadow. Arian turned to the stranger. "And you? What will you do now?" She smiled, the stars in her eyes dimming to soft human warmth. "Watch. Wait, until the next reflection forgets itself." As she walked away, disappearing into the growing light of dawn, Arian felt a quiet certainty settle within him. He looked once more into the water. The reflection that gazed back no longer mimicked him. It met his gaze, equal, aware, free. He smiled faintly and whispered, "Then let's begin again."